Dodge this.
One world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition of DTRH. It is July 6th, 2016. Yes, I am live again tonight. I'm going to be getting into two major things. Hillary Clinton and heroin addiction. Neither one is good for you. I know I'm not being a facetious dick when I'm actually talking about heroin addiction like that. I'm actually being serious. It's not good for you. I speak from a personal place. In fact, tonight I have a something very, very special planned for hour number 2. It's very powerful hour of radio. Make sure you stay tuned. First hour, I'm going to be woodshedding Hillary Clinton with my good buddy Scotty Lopez here. But second hour, I'm going to be airing something that Rad Chick, Christina Consolo, you all know who she is, the ever lovable Rad Chick. She's tuned in right now, I think. Hi, babe. So I'm going to be airing a show she did 2 years ago. She was sitting in for Charlie McGrath, and she did a show that was very personal. It wasn't about radiation. It wasn't about Fukushima or Chernobyl. It was actually about one of her daughters and the addiction to heroin that she was going through at the time. And I'm proud to report that her daughters are like my daughters. You all know that Christina and I are together, and I have bonded very tightly with her kids, and they're like my kids. And I'm very proud of the one daughter that went through this, and I'm not going to name her because I don't want to do that to her, but I'm very proud of her. She's an amazing young lady, and she pulled herself out of this. And 2 years on, 2.5 years on, she's completely the opposite of what you would have expected the outcome to be. That's a huge deal. So hour number 2, I'm going to be airing this show she did 2 years ago. It was never aired. It was never talked about. It was aired, when she did it, and then it was, the archive was just not put up for whatever reason. Not her or Charlie. It was whatever, the network that it was on at the time didn't put it up. Anyway, so the show wasn't around for anybody to hear. And Christina was contacted by a listener of ours who had a recent overdose death in the family due to heroin. And Christina decided that it was time to dig this out and try to find it and air it for the listeners to hear, because she decided to share this personal story. Much thought went into this, but she decided to air this personal story to help the general public at large, because there's so many people that are having this issue. So we're going to get into that in hour 2 anyway. I didn't want to pontificate too much in hour 2 on that, because there's a limited amount of time for me to air the full thing, and you need to hear it because it's that powerful. So it's good that I blab now and get that out of the way. Anyway, let's go to the woodshed with Hillary Clinton, shall we? But before we do that, I have to introduce my guest co-host for the evening. Scotty Lopez is hanging out with me, getting some radio time in. Scott, you with me?
Oh, yeah. What's up, man?
So, Hillary, you and I did a show on Hillary a couple months back, and we talked about all the people that died surrounding her. And we talked then, and I know I said on air then I didn't think that she was going to have charges put against her, and I figured that they were going to let her off. And you pretty much had the same stance. Now, fast forward a couple of months, and boom, it looks like we're either fortune tellers or we can see the painfully obvious truth that hashtag you just get a Hillary pass. If, apparently if you're Hillary Clinton, you don't know that something's illegal, or you just have to claim that you didn't know that at the time you were doing something illegal, that it was illegal to be doing it, you get a hashtag Hillary pass. So I'm trying to get that going. I saw that earlier. Somebody had posted something with hashtag Hillary pass, and I was like, oh, I'm pushing that. So,
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, meme Scott. Anytime you need to get out of trouble, you just ask for a hashtag Hillary pass. Right? Apparently, as long as you claim you didn't know it was illegal while you were doing it. Jimmy posted on Facebook, he said, I might as well just open a meth house. And I was like, hey, as long as you can claim that you didn't know it was illegal when you did it, it's cool. Hashtag Hillary pass.
I wasn't doing it with bad intentions.
Right? Even though the FBI director was like, anybody else, this is not to say that if somebody else did this, there wouldn't be repercussions. Oh, so what you're saying is because Hillary Clinton did it, she gets off scot-free. I mean, maybe that was Comey's way of saying that without getting assassinated. Right? I mean,
yeah.
Everybody connected to Hillary Clinton, Scott, in one way, shape, or form, has gotten off.
He couldn't just go up there and be like, she's guilty as hell, but I don't want to die under mysterious circumstances.
No, that's pretty much what he said, though.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty much what he said without saying it. You know what I mean? He didn't he didn't come out directly and say that, but he pretty much did say that. I knew that. Come on, I knew he wasn't gonna, say we should press charges against her. They would never, ever put her in jail. A lot of people were, they're gonna throw her under the bus. Ha ha ha! It's about time. No, Hillary Clinton is one of those people that you'll rarely ever seen get thrown under the bus. You know why? You know why they won't throw her under the bus? Because she knows too much. She knows where too many bodies are buried, and she knows way too many secrets about way too many people. And if she went down, you don't think that she would start spilling the beans on everybody else? She wouldn't make it to.
That's exactly what we said on Joe's show. I mean, if she goes down, she could probably bring down 90% of the government with her.
True. It's true. I mean, she'd bring down the current president. She'd bring down like 3/4, if not all of his administration. Past administrations, people that are no longer in government, that are just civilians now. There's too many people that she could bring down. I mean, technically, all she'd have to do is say, if they actually did arrest her, she could just make the threat. She wouldn't make it to a court. She wouldn't make it to any hearing or anything. She wouldn't even make it to a preliminary hearing. Anybody remember Deborah Jean Palfrey, the DC madam? She wasn't a politician, and she knew names and she knew things, and she didn't make it to court, did she? She said on Alex Jones's show and on with Geraldo Rivera, 2 separate occasions, "I will not kill myself. I'm not suicidal." And then they found her hanging in her mother's backyard in Florida from suicide, quote unquote. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. And she was just a DC madam. She was just the owner and manager and CEO of a brothel that catered to high-end people in DC. Now, do you think maybe Hillary Clinton has a bit more connections? You don't think they would never let her get to any type of court situation? No. If she ever got arrested, she wouldn't make it. That's why they can't do that. She's too. It's not like it was in the 60s when you could assassinate a sitting president in front of everybody, do so in broad daylight and get away with it. The internet stops that kind of stuff now. I mean, they still will, and then blame it on, they'll pull stuff off. That's always a card on the table. But that would be, Hillary Clinton getting arrested and then suddenly getting shanked in prison, little too high profile. You know what I'm saying? Little too shady, Scott. You know what I mean? Like even the average Joe would be like, they must not have wanted her to talk. Like it wouldn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that they wanted to off her.
Yeah, I mean,
for real,
it's crazy, man. Although that does sound quite quite nice, though.
Well, I know, but they won't. They would never do that. You would see with that. You would see like the internal destruction of their own, because then you'd have other people that are faithful to her, and or like Bill. Then you'd have him and anybody that's around, like Chelsea. All of them would end up. You think about it. If they took her out, they'd have to take all those other people out, right? Can
you imagine the headline? Hillary stabbed in prison.
Well, exactly, and that would be. It's too sensational. People, even the average Joe, would be like, "No, they did it. They did it so she wouldn't talk. She knew too much." They know that. They know. I mean, it's so. What they would have to do in that instance would be so bold-faced. They know that. So they've thought about this. Okay, if you and I can sit and think about this the way they would think about it, then they've already thought about this, right? So they say, okay, we can't. The way we used to do things, and political or assassination in politics has been around since going back to the days of Greece, right? So it's not something that's new. But they understand that in today's day and age, with the way the public is, and I'll play a clip that Zbigniew Brzezinski talked about back in 2010. This is 6 years ago. He made a comment about mankind is becoming politically awakened. Well, that was 6 years ago, so just imagine. Plus the proliferation of the internet in the past 6 years and social media and everything else. Although people are dumbed down to a degree, and they are ignorant to many things, they're also... There's just so much, it's like you can't hide it anymore. And it's not easy to hide their crap. It's not easy to hide their lies anymore. It's getting more and more difficult. Radio shows, internet radio like this, TFR, the entire networks, they're making things like this much more difficult to hide. So it's more apparent even to the general public as to what's going on. So they can't do things the way they used to. Right? Perhaps that's why Jay Rockefeller said the internet never should have existed when he was a senator. David Rockefeller's son. Yeah, douche. Anyway, they fear the mass awakening that's coming. Well, I'm getting sidetracked. I'll get into that with Zbigniew Brzezinski when I play this clip, because she's a member of the CFR, and she actually talked about when she was the Secretary of State. She thanked the Council on Foreign Relations for pretty much telling her how to think and what to do. She actually says that. And then I'm going to play a clip from Brzezinski. So they can't kill her. Right? There's no assassination. You're not going to see that. That's, you got to think like they would. People go, well, I wouldn't assassinate anybody. Okay, but you're not them. So let's pretend this is House of Cards, right? Okay. So everybody can relate to that Netflix show. And you get to watch Kevin Spacey. So let's pretend this is an episode of House of Cards. Would they assassinate her? No. We've already explained why. So the only option left on the table, they're not going to prosecute her, because if they prosecute her, it puts them in that position of right? So those two go hand in hand, prosecution, assassination. So what happens? Well, the third option is to not prosecute her, even if you have to violate law, because she knows too much. She'd bring too many people down. So it's easier for them to violate the law and rewrite rules, or just violate them and say executive privilege or whatever other bullshit that they want to claim to get away with it, than it is to do what they used to do, like what they did with Kennedy back in the 60s. And Kennedy, he thought he was the president. He was trying to do things his way. And they were like, oh, you're going to stop the Vietnam War, amongst other things? We all saw what they did to him in Dallas. Right? But they don't do that anymore. Now it's political assassination. They try that first. Then sometimes you still do get assassinated as a politician. But with Hillary Clinton, it's not like killing off a much less known senator in the public eye. Everybody knows who Hillary Clinton is. And even Bernie Sanders supporters, to a large degree, will not vote for her. Some of them will. Many of them will. But a large contingent of them won't, because they know how evil she is. I mean, there are people even, in the... I know you'd often think that the people that don't like Hillary Clinton are either A, Trump supporters, or B, quote unquote conservatives. If we're gonna use labels, which we shouldn't, but if we're gonna use political labels and we're gonna say conservative or liberal, right? Well, even the left-leaning liberals will say, right, those people that fall under that political ideology of Democrat, or they believe whatever, they identify themselves, we'll say, as liberal. Even those people are like, a lot of those are like, Hillary Clinton doesn't identify with us. She's actually more of a neocon. They see through her bullshit where she's pandering to them. Oh, I'm one of you. No, she's not. She's neither. She's neither centrist, she's neither right nor left. She's just evil. That's what she is. She doesn't care about any political ideology. She cares about Hillary, and Hillary, surprisingly. If that's not just apparent right in your face. But anyway. So, that's why she got off. She was never going to be prosecuted. She knows too much. She just knows too much. It's not easy to, again, you can't just take her out. So they got to let her off. It's one of the two. The better of the two options for them is to let her off. And then they understand that the general public has a short attention span. So within like 72 hours, people are not going to be pissed off about this. What's today? Wednesday, right? This came out yesterday. So, okay, today's Wednesday. By Friday morning, it might still be being talked about. But I'm willing to bet, let's see, Friday, usually weird shit happens on a Friday. Okay, so something bad will probably happen on Friday, or something else will hit the news headlines by tomorrow and or Friday morning, and this will start to be not talked about anymore, and nobody will give a crap what Hillary did, and it'll be forgotten about. It'll be forgotten.
Well, you're actually already starting to see it, because you've had this guy in Baton Rouge that was shot, and now this is becoming the main story right now.
Right. So by Friday, goodbye, Hillary and her emails. Goodbye. Hillary who? What emails? Oh, the FBI said she's cool. Don't worry about it. Moving on. Yay. Hillary for president. Yay. No. Google the boys on the tracks. Google Mena, Arkansas. Well, I got an audio clip I'm going to play in the second half of the first hour. My good friend Loren Murray, she was speaking with Daryl Hamamoto recently at UC Davis, I think it was. And they did a great interview. It's on YouTube. You should go look it up. But I'm going to play a clip from there where she talks about Clinton's connection and Mena, Arkansas, and heroin, which is going to segue into hour two. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So, Hillary Clinton. Scott, did you happen to catch... Reason Magazine actually took her statement that she gave to the press last year, and they cut it next to Comey talking the other day when he was talking about her. And it's just, if you listen to what Now, again, obviously they didn't charge her, but if you listen to like what her statement was in public, so that's an official statement on the subject, and then what the FBI director says, well, that's two totally different things. So does that mean Hillary Clinton was lying?
What? Hillary lying? No.
Scott, I'm very upset. Hillary Clinton lied. I can't believe she lied to me. Hashtag Hillary would never lie. I can't even say that. I can't even say that with a straight face.
I know. It's ridiculous.
Hashtag Hillary's full of shit. That should be the hashtag. Oh, and I tweeted, by the way, the Hillary Clinton account earlier with, I think it was hashtag rule of law or something like that. Let me check, actually. I have to actually check. I can just go to Twitter right now. It's pretty bad. I can't remember what I actually tweeted her. But I know it's not really her. It's one of her goofy, probably interns or whatever. But let me look here. I told people to retweet it. I took a screenshot of it. Let me see. I actually have to scroll down to look at it. Here it is. I put at Hillary Clinton, hashtag rule of law matters. Hashtag rule of law matters. Surprisingly, that wasn't very popular on Twitter. Not many people seem to have noticed it. It's kind of weird. Interesting. I guess Twitter must be censoring stuff. Oh, but Twitter would never censor anything, Popeye. Right. Right. Because Hillary's, exposed on Twitter and Obama's exposed on Twitter. Oh, but wait, a lot of that stuff gets censored. Oh. Are you saying social media would censor stuff about the current administration or the powers that shouldn't be in general, Popeye? Yes. Okay, anyway, I'm going off on a rant. So, I'm going to play this clip, Scott, from Reason Magazine really quick. It's like a minute and a half, but it's great. You gotta listen to it. I mean, I don't have to say anything. She contradicts, well, you'll see. Here.
I did not email any classified material to anyone. There is no classified material.
110 emails in 52 email chains have been determined by the owning agency to contain classified information at the time they were sent or received.
I provided all my emails that could possibly be work-related.
Several thousand work-related emails that were not among the group of 30,000 emails returned by Secretary Clinton.
I thought using one device would be simpler.
She also used numerous mobile devices to send and to read email.
There were no security breaches.
It is possible that hostile actors gained access to Secretary Clinton's personal email account.
It was my practice to communicate with State Department and other government officials on their .gov accounts.
The hostile actors gained access to the private commercial email accounts of people with whom Secretary Clinton was in regular contact from her personal account.
No doubt that we've done exactly what we should have done.
They were extremely careless in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information.
People will be able to judge for themselves.
We cannot find a case that would support bringing criminal charges on these facts.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
To be clear, this is not to suggest that in similar circumstances, a person who engaged in this activity would face no consequences.
Americans will find that, interesting, and I look forward to having a discussion about that.
And by the way, does anybody do you recognize that bullshit statement that she just made? Do you know where that little gem was used before? Just so everybody's clear, because the Clintons and the Bushes, they hate each other, right? Oh, but George W, the Muppet, used that same line when he was questioned repeatedly about why him and Dick Cheney wouldn't meet with the 9/11 Commission on record, and why everything, you couldn't take notes, you couldn't record it.
Oh, that's right. That's what he said in the Rose Garden, huh?
He said, they look forward to asking me questions, and I look forward to answering them. It's a canned bullshit line. And I mean, do you need it's like right out of their playbook. They're like, oh, hold on. Do you see how they practice things? Go back and watch George Bush W, the Muppet. Go back, ladies and gentlemen, on YouTube, and watch him talk about when him and Cheney didn't want to be interviewed on the record. Listen to what he says, and then go back and listen to that clip again. It's the same line. I heard her say it, and I was like, oh, wow. She sounds like the Muppet right after 9/11. No, but I'm sure they're all free-thinking individuals, right? They don't have handlers, and they don't have a playbook that they work out of, right? The Bushes and the Clintons probably don't talk, right? I'm sure they hate each other.
Look, Popeye, the stand down of NORAD was just careless, and they didn't mean to do it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They didn't mean to do it. You know, Scott, I have a clip that I'm going to play on the other side of the break because the break's coming up in about a minute, but there's these two clips that go hand in hand. And it's Hillary Clinton admitting back at the Council on Foreign Relations when she was the Secretary of State that she does what she's told. Pretty much. And that they run things. You'll hear it. And then you'll hear Brzezinski talk about that global awakening going back 6 years ago when he was talking about this. How he says it's easier to kill 1 million people now than it is to control 1 million people. Oh, but I'm sure killing people with chemtrails or allowing things like Fukushima to continue to go on and other things. I'm sure, or Monsanto and glyphosate and all that. I'm sure that's just conspiracy theories, right? Because they would never want to kill millions of people, even though it's far easier, according to Brzezinski, to kill them than it is to control them. Not my words. Not my words. Oh, who's Brzezinski? Obama's foreign policy advisor. It's a big new Brzezinski. Also responsible for Al-Qaeda. Thank you. Or partially.
You almost make it sound like they want to cull the population or something.
Oh, I know. Now I'm getting into conspiracy theory realm, Scotty. Uh-oh. Break coming up, ladies and gentlemen. Don't go anywhere. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. So, Scotty, getting right back into it because we only got about 26 minutes left here in the first hour, and I want to get 3 clips in. And towards the end of the show, I'm going to play a clip with, as I said, Loren Murray talking to Daryl Hamamoto, and it's about 4 minutes, but it's a great piece, and it'll segue from Hillary Clinton and her evil scumbaggery to hour number 2, talking about Christina Radjic, talking about what her family suffered through with heroin addiction, and it's a very powerful piece. So anyway, I want to get these last couple audio clips in. So first, Scott, is Hillary back in 2009. It was July of 2009, actually. She was speaking at the Council on Foreign Relations, and this is when she was the Secretary of State. You know, at the same time as she had this illegal email thing going on, but hey, you know, she could do whatever she wants. Hashtag Hillary Pass. So this is hashtag Hillary Pass over at the Council on Foreign Relations. We all know who they are. I've done shows about them. Just look them up if you don't know these scumbaggery and the connections to the Rockefellers. And oh, by the way, Clinton is a Rockefeller, but that's a whole separate thing. Do research. Turn off your television. Start to read books. You'd be surprised what you don't know. Anyway, here's Hillary Clinton back in 2009 first. Then we'll get to the big new Brzezinski. By the way, his daughter, Mika Brzezinski, you all know her, right? MSNBC. She's on that show Morning Joe with Joe Scarborough. She's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, too. A lot of media members are. Anyway, let's go to the audio.
Oh, thank you very much, Richard. And I am delighted to be here in these new headquarters. I have been often to, I guess, the mothership in New York City. But it's good to have an outpost of the council right here down the street from the State Department. We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have as far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future. I mean, Richard.
Wait. Hold on. What did she just say? Let me rewind that.
Thank you very much, Richard, and I am delighted to be here in these new headquarters. I have been often to, I guess, the mothership in New York City. But it's good to have an outpost of the council right here down the street from the State Department. We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have as far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future.
Oh, Popeye, that's just hyperbole. Really? Really? Hold on. Let me, because it's only like 30 seconds. Let me rewind it one more time so you can hear this clearly what she says, because this isn't her just talking politically or making small talk or pandering or whatever you want to try to label it as. She's clearly stating, she's speaking in front of the Council on Foreign Relations. Remember, these think tanks is where they actually speak how they feel. That's why generally a lot of times this stuff is not televised, or they, a lot of times they'll resign. Well, back in the day, they actually used to try to have some semblance of, I'm not connected to that, because they used to, like Bush resigned. Other people have, I'm not in the Council on Foreign Relations. Obama, remember, there was somebody that asked him about that, and he was like, as far as I know, I'm not a member. Bullshit. But anyway, I digress. Let's go back to Hillary Clinton.
Thank you very much, Richard, and I am delighted to be here in these new headquarters. I have been often to, the mothership in New York City, but it's good to have an outpost of the council right here down the street from the State Department. We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have as far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future.
There you have it. There you have it. So do you think it'd be any different if she was the president? Scott, thoughts?
How creepy is it that she called it the mothership and then said, well, it's nice to have an outpost down the road. Just weird.
Well, she's thinking back to her days as Diana from V, where she tears her human face mask off. So she's just waiting to. I'm telling you right now, it would not surprise me one bit. She takes the oath, and then immediately, like, she places her hand on the Bible, it bursts into flames, and she peels her face off, and then swallows like a child's soul or something right there on live TV. There's your future president, ladies and gentlemen.
And then you notice the day that they came out and they said that they weren't going to recommend indictment or anything. She was flying around with Obama on Air Force One, and they were really putting that image out there, that psychological image of her getting off of Air Force One, and she was speaking at the podium with the presidential seal on the front. I mean, it was just disgusting.
Now, if that were you or me on a day that, we were being investigated by the FBI and we had just been investigated by the FBI, we probably would be in jail, not flying around on Air Force One. Oh, didn't her husband just meet with Loretta Lynch too at like an airport? Oh, wait. My plane just happened to be there, and I just happened to bump into her.
And didn't Loretta Lynch represent wasn't she part of the defense team during Watergate?
I'm sure that's a coincidence, Scott. I'm sure all these coincidences, like bumping into each other at the airport. I mean, who doesn't bump into their friends at the airport on private planes? Even though you waited extra time to take off. Who doesn't have that? I mean, didn't you have that problem last week? You bumped into Ken while you guys were flying, and you almost bumped into Joe. You only missed him by like 5 minutes, from what I heard. So, it happens all the time, right? Okay, and now I'm being a facetious prick. No, it doesn't happen all the time. Come on. Seriously, let's put ourselves in this situation for uno momento. Put yourself in this situation, ladies and gentlemen. It's not Hillary Clinton. It's you that's being charged. Or you're not being charged. You're being investigated, we'll say, right? Because she wasn't charged. So it's you being investigated for something. And let's say that you're being investigated and by like the local detectives in your local police department. And while you're being investigated, your husband and or wife, your spouse, whatever, goes and accidentally bumps into the chief of police somewhere. But, randomly, like, you're just happen to bump into the chief of police, I don't know, in the parking lot of Walmart or something. Oh, hi, chief, blah, 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 blah. Do you think anybody would look, and then suddenly your wife gets off, or your spouse, husband gets off of whatever case? Do you think that the general public or people around there wouldn't say, that's kind of shady. What did the spouse and the police chief talk about? And then suddenly the detectives were told, back off, or drop it, or whatever. You don't think that would arouse suspicion? Oh, it would. I'm sure there'd be talk. I'm sure there might even be people's heads rolling over something like that, because it's on a local level. But you do it on a national level with a politician who's notoriously full of shit, and nobody cares. Well, some people care. But her voters, the people that want to vote for her, don't care. It's not that people don't know she's a criminal. The people that want to vote for her literally don't care. They're like, oh, that's just rumors. Google the boys on the tracks. Look up what happened when 2 innocent teenagers witnessed them smuggling drugs. They were killed. The state police killed them. Killed them. Police officers killed teenagers to cover up the crimes that they were engaging in at the behest of Bill Clinton in Mena, Arkansas. Look it up. Go on YouTube, type in the boys on the tracks. There's a book written about it. The mother of one of the boys has been very verbal about it when it happened. You don't hear that, though. Oh, I know. It's part of some vast right-wing conspiracy. I know. Look it up. This woman's evil. Make no mistake. This isn't, I'm not coming out being like, I support Trump or I'm right-wing or whatever you want to label somebody that doesn't like Hillary Clinton. I don't like evil. First of all, she's not the lesser of two evils. Second of all, she's just pure, unadulterated evil. That woman, honestly, I don't have a problem with a female president. Hoorah if you get a good one. She ain't it. She is not it. She should be rotting in a prison cell. She is evil incarnate. She cares nothing about who she has to step on and or kill to achieve her own personal goals.
Yeah, she's a power tripping psychopath. Like,
bam, you just
to the
nailed
T.
it. There you go. Power tripping psychopath. Thank you, Scotty Lopez. Again. Like a B-52 you come in. No, seriously, she's a power tripping psychopath. That's the exact definition of what she is. She's evil, dude. I mean, I can't stress that enough. Thoughts?
Man, I really do not want to see her as president. It's going to be horrible. It's going to be so bad.
Oh, I'm willing to bet she'd be like Second Amendment gone, First Amendment gone. And there'd be people that are like, yeah, we should get rid of it. That's outdated. The First Amendment. I've heard people say that the First Amendment is outdated. You do realize that you wouldn't be able to say that about the First Amendment, right? I'm just saying. Well, I mean, technically, you can say whatever you want, but supposedly that amendment does kind of protect it. Although it really just rates it.
The way she treated those comedians that made fun of her, that's how she's going to treat the entire country and anybody that criticizes her administration.
But she's not a tyrant. Yeah, okay. And if you're against her, I'm telling you right now, it was already being laid out like a year ago, but I can see it now. People are going to be like, oh, you're sexist if you don't like Hillary Clinton. You just don't like her because she's a woman. No. And being a woman doesn't make her qualified to be president. Your gender has nothing to do with the qualifications for that job. Period. End of story.
Well, and even if you take away the fact, okay, just let's put aside the fact that the whole indictment thing or whatever. The FBI director basically said that it was gross incompetence and complete lack of any sort of judgment, with her email stuff. So if she is completely incompetent, what makes you think she's competent to be president?
She gave 0 Fs about doing the job. At the very least, if it wasn't a conspiracy, if she wasn't up to no good, right? If it was just, oops, then at the very least, she's extremely incompetent and almost criminally negligent. I mean, other people could do the same thing, and they would at the very least be fired from their position, if not charges brought up on them. And in fact, other people have been jailed. And yet, she gets away with it. No prosecutor could bring a case. Really? Alberto Gonzalez, who I know, he's another one under the Bush administration. I know. But I saw he made an interesting observation on it. He said that when Comey said that, and that like no prosecutor could bring a reasonable case against him. Basically, you're being unreasonable if anybody that tried to go after her or wanted to follow suit, or and bring her to justice for what she's done. At least with emails anyway. That you would be unreasonable if you were trying to bring a case against her. So it's almost like subliminal messaging too, with the way that they speak during these statements. So I just thought it was interesting that Gonzalez, who I know torture and everything else, I know I'm not giving the guy a pass, he's a dirtbag, but I thought it interesting that he made this observation about James Comey's speech. I saw it in an article somebody had transcribed an interview he did, and I read it because I was like, oh, let's see what this guy has to say, because it's interesting how they throw each other under the bus sometimes with little comments here or there. So, and Hillary Clinton, by the way, made a veiled reference to what I was talking about last segment with she knows too much. When this came about, she kind of made a reference to that, like a veiled reference, like I know too much, basically. It's not exactly what she said, and I can't remember verbatim what she said, but you can go just look up Hillary Clinton makes veiled threat if indicted. I'm sure that'll. It was sort of buried and implied in the way she said it. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember the exact verbiage, but I remember she made like a veiled threat, and it was like, wait, what? Basically, it was like, you bring me down, I'll bring all of you down. Like, I know too much. So
maybe that's what Bill told Loretta on the plane.
Probably
a little soft intimidation.
Oh, dude, I'm willing to bet. Oh, or if Hillary becomes president, I'm willing to bet if Hillary Clinton becomes president, Loretta Lynch will be a Supreme Court nominee.
No, she already said that she would have her as Attorney General.
Yeah, well, I'm willing to bet she would probably nominate her for the Supreme Court and replace her as attorney. I'm just saying, I'm willing to bet that'll be if that happens, if Hillary becomes president and you see Loretta Lynch get nominated for Supreme Court by her, that's the payback for what she did. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying, it's like, there you have it. I know it takes a little while, but there you have it. I know I'm being a conspiracy theorist. It's more like I'm being a conspiracy factualist. By the way, conspiracy, legal charge. Scott and I were going to rob a 7-Eleven and we got caught. One of the things they would charge us with is conspiracy to commit robbery. But I guess conspiracy to defraud like the entire country, then it's crazy, ghosts and UFOs and Bigfoot and websites on the internet and YouTube, and you can't believe any of that, even though it's all bullshit, red herring, straw man, ad hominem retardedness. But anyway, I digress. So I want to play this clip really quick of Brzezinski, because I was talking about the Council on Foreign Relations, and we have like 9.5 minutes left, and I want to get both these clips in. So the first one, it's like 3 minutes. It's Brzezinski talking, and listen to what he says. This is the Council on Foreign Relations in Montreal, Canada, in 2010.
Let me begin by making just a thumbnail definition of the geopolitical context in which we all find ourselves, including America. And in my perspective, that geopolitical context is very much defined by two new global realities. The first is that global political leadership, by which I mean the role of certain leading powers in the world, has now become much more diversified, unlike what it was until relatively recently. Relatively recently still, the world was dominated by the Atlantic world, as it had been for many centuries. It no longer is. Today, the rise of the Far East has created a new, but much more differentiated global leadership, one which in a nutshell involves, if one can hazard, an arbitrary list of the primary players in the world scene: the United States, clearly, maybe next to it, but maybe the European Union. I say maybe because it is not yet a political entity. Certainly, increasingly so, and visibly so, China. Russia, mainly in one respect only, because it is a nuclear power co-equal to the United States, but otherwise very deficient in all of the major indices of what constitutes global power. Behind Russia, perhaps in...
By the way, I just have to interrupt. Zbigniew Brzezinski hates Russia, so anytime he gets a chance to like crap on them, he does. Just saying. Notice he took like an extra 30 seconds just to like dump all over them.
Individually, but to a much lesser extent, Germany, France, Great Britain, Japan, certainly, although it does not have a politically assertive posture. India is rising. And then in the background of that, we have the new entity of G20, a much more diversified global leadership, lacking internal unity, with many of its members in bilateral antagonisms. That makes the context much more complicated. The other major change in international affairs is that for the first time,
here it comes. Listen to what he says.
In all of human history, mankind is politically awakened. That's a total new reality. Total new reality. It has not been so for most of human history until the last 100 years. And in the course of the last 100 years, the whole world has become politically awakened. And no matter where you go, politics is a matter of social engagement, and most people know what is generally going on in the world, and are consciously aware of global iniquities, inequalities, lack of respect, exploitation. Mankind is now politically awakened and stirring. The combination of the two, a diversified global leadership, politically awakened masses, makes a much more difficult context for any major power, including currently the leading world power, the United States.
Then he goes on for a question and answer period. So there you have it. Mankind is becoming politically awakened for the first time in human history, and they are scared. It's easier to kill 1 million people than it is to control them. Used to be the other way around. Not anymore. Not anymore, ladies and gentlemen. And that frightens them, and that's why you see things ramping up, because it's easier to kill you than it is to control you. There really is an agenda. But anyway, I digress. Before we run out of time, I want to play this clip because this segues into hour number 2, which I'll be introducing the hour number 2 section on heroin addiction. A very, very, very powerful show. Make sure you tune in for the second hour of this broadcast tonight. But this segues into it, so I want to play this really quick. This is Loren Murray talking to Daryl Hamamoto at UC Davis recently. Great interview on YouTube. Check it out. Listen how she links heroin and MENA and the Clintons.
And Leon Panetta is another one. Leon Panetta, who was Secretary of Transportation under Clinton. Then he was head of the CIA under Obama for 2 years, and then he was moved to Secretary of Defense. And I said, wow, that's really interesting. Gee, what ties all of those together? It's drugs. Yeah, Clinton built the Mena Airport in Arkansas to bring China white heroin. The Chinese were paying back the Rockefellers for the development funds they loaned China. And so we built the airport. It's a free trade zone. The U.S. government has no jurisdiction. The Walmart trucks and the Tyson chicken trucks go into that airport. They pick up the heroin, and they are the distributors around the United States.
Just as a footnote, ladies and gentlemen, Daniel Hopsicker has produced a DVD series, and he's written books on this very system. It may sound bizarre, crazy. It's never really hit the general public's attention, but what Loren is saying here has been explored and exposed by a number of investigative journalists. If you care to follow up on it, check out the work of Daniel Hopsicker.
Yes, that's correct. And also Dope Incorporated, Britain's opium war against the U.S. Well, this is a lot more than the opium war against the U.S. This is part of this global dope economy that's 5 times greater than the legitimate economy of the world. And so this Mina Airport and Panetta's time in the CIA, of course, they run all the drugs. And then the Secretary of Defense, well, the military is very involved in the drug racketeering, so forth and so on. I mean, that's what the Vietnam War was about. It was getting opium from the Himalayan foothills because Turkey stopped growing opium poppies. And so they had to find another source. And it's amazing because drugs are just flooding the United States now. And for the last about 8 years, 6 or 8 years, I've been reading JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, and I'd never seen articles about heroin addiction. Well, they're reporting it like in every other article now in JAMA and what states it's going into. And it seems heroin use seems to increase when we're having wars or military conflicts in other countries. And it's because the soldiers are self-medicating. The depleted uranium weapons and the weaponry residue that they're exposed to is making them so sick, they're going on heroin to just ease the pain. But now, in 2016, I'm getting a lot of feedback from students at Davis that the Davis campus and off campus is flooded with heroin.
See, I never would have known that.
Yes.
Yeah, that completely bypassed. I thought maybe crystal methamphetamine, or crank, that I knew about. I know about marijuana and, alcohol, but I didn't understand that heroin had become so popular. I understand in the Northeast, however, in states like Vermont.
Yes.
There's all these different overdoses with upper middle class,
yes.
Professional, quote unquote, white people.
That's one of the first places it started that I read about
in Vermont.
JAMA. Yes, in Vermont.
So it's linked to the.
All right, I gotta pause it right there because I hear the break music coming up. Hour number 2, don't go anywhere. We're gonna connect. Now you see how Hillary Clinton is connected to drug running men in Arkansas. Go do your research. That's hours and hours of research. Check out Daniel Hopsinger's work. Great investigative journalist. Anyway, stay tuned for hour number 2. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com, PopeyeRadio.com, and of course, my huge, massive YouTube archive section, DTRH Radio Archives, DTRH Radio Archives. One more time, Delta Tango Romeo Hotel. If you know the phonetic alphabet, Radio Archives over on YouTube. Check it out. Anyway, hour number 2, I want to get right into it because I want to make sure I have time to air this entire broadcast. So, Rad Chick, Christina Consolo, did an amazing, an emotional, raw show 2 years ago, April of 2014, about one of her daughters and what the rest of the family and herself went through with one of her daughters' addiction to heroin. And as I said in the first hour, I've bonded with all of her daughters. And they are like my kids. I can honestly say that. I love them very much. And I am very proud of the young lady that you'll be hearing about tonight. She's an amazing young lady. That kid's got more strength than most 50 and 60-year-olds I know. And she's so humble, she doesn't even realize it. And if she does, she doesn't talk about it. She really is a good kid, and I love her very much. So anyway, tonight I'm going to air her story and Christina's story. And Christina had the courage and the guts to air this 2 years ago, and it hasn't really been out. And if you didn't hear it live, then you didn't hear it, basically. And one of our listeners had a recent heroin death in the family. And Christina decided that it was time because this has just gone on too many times. And she feels that if this at least helps one person or one family, it's worth putting this true, real story out there. So I'm going to give the airways to her here in the second hour. This is her story about being the mother of a former heroin addict. As I said, our daughter, she's no longer addicted to that garbage, and I'm very proud of her for that. She's really a good kid. Anyway, here's her story. Here we go.
Welcome to Wide Awake News. Today is Tuesday, April 1st, 2014. I'm your host, Christina Consolo. I'm sitting in for Dinah Everett Snyder tonight, who is sick. Karen's sick, and Charlie's working. So they asked me at the last minute to fill in. And this will not be a radiation show. We're going to talk about something else. Something that I was thinking about doing a show on before, but I didn't really have the nerve to do it. And when I was on with Charlie about a week and a half ago, we were talking about drug dependence. And one of the things that I failed to bring up during that show, but I have a lot of insight into, is what it's like to have a child who is a drug addict. And on top of all the things that I've had going on with the Fukushima stuff and my own health issues, our family has been dealing with this horrible drug dependency that has been going on for a couple years. And after I did the show with Charlie, I had talked to my daughter and I said, do you mind if I talk about you on the radio? Because I think maybe that story could help some people knowing what happened to you and what you're going through. And this conversation with her took place during one of our prison phone calls, because she is currently in a federal penitentiary in Michigan, which resulted from her drug addiction. And it's been a long and pretty horrible road for not only her, but for my whole family. Since this all started, this situation has brought my attention to what happens when there's an addiction in the family, what happens when you go to rehab, go through treatment, when you get involved in the court system, probation, jail, prison. It's quite a road. And having a child in the prison system now and hearing the other stories of people that are incarcerated with her for really menial things. The reason that she is in prison is not because of the addiction as much as it is she violated her probation. And the judge that she has does not tolerate that at all very well. The first time he cut her a break, the second time he threw the book at her. And since she's been there, we've gone through loss of paperwork and all kinds of things that I'll get to when I get into her story. I'm actually a little unnerved talking about this because it's such a personal thing. But unless you've gone through something like this with a family member, you just don't understand how horribly destructive it is. And I want to read something which Charlie and I had talked about a little bit about opioid dependency when I was on his last show. And it's a dependence or a medical diagnosis that is characterized by an individual's inability to stop using opiates, morphine, heroin, codeine, oxycodone, hydrocodone, etc., even when objectively it is in his or her best interest to do so. And it's a major component of addiction. In 1964, the WHO Expert Committee on Drug Dependence introduced dependence as a cluster of physiological, behavioral, and cognitive phenomena of variable intensity. in which the use of a psychoactive drug or drugs takes on a high priority. The necessary descriptive characteristics are preoccupation with a desire to obtain and take the drug and persistent drug-seeking behavior. Determinants and problematic consequences of drug dependence may be biological, psychological, or social, and usually interact. The core concept of the WHO definition requires the presence of a strong desire or a sense of compulsion to take the drug. And believe me, they will do anything to get it. Now, my experience with this situation started when I was recovering from a back injury. And we went through a period of time where we didn't have any money for 2 years. And I mean nothing. We didn't have food. We didn't have heat. It was pretty bad. And it was kind of our own like personal shit hitting the fan, so to speak, in the family. And I had been waiting for disability to come through, workman's comp to come through, the hospital where I got injured for them to come through, and just nothing was happening. And I ended up having to get an attorney and just sue everybody. But during that time, my daughter started using heroin, and what she had explained to me back then is that she just really couldn't see a way out of things anymore. And it's kind of the typical road that people will take sometimes. Of course, they do get addicted after they have surgery, or they're prescribed it by a physician to treat pain issues or something like that. But hers, it was a social choice, and it was something that she got into with her boyfriend. And her boyfriend at the time, who was 17, was living with us because he had a brother who was addicted to heroin, and the family did not want him at the house anymore. They had several children. This drug issue with the brother was taking over their whole family, and they said, could he stay with you? Because, we're just really worried about having him around our other son. And I said, sure, he can help with things around the house. And, they knew how bad the situation was at our house, but it was better than what was going on at their house. And I didn't really understand, how bad it could be until then all of a sudden I had kids in my own family doing it. So I had started noticing, it was probably the summer of 2009, she was a senior in high school, that she was really skinny and she was pretty pale, and she really didn't want to do things with us anymore. She didn't have any interest in the things that she used to take an interest in. Or when we did do things like, if we went to a park for something, she was always in a big hurry to get out of there. And it was just maybe, I chalked it up to the typical teenage behavior, and her boyfriend was acting the same way. And, I was telling people, just cut them a little slack, they're being antisocial for whatever reason. And then one day she couldn't get heroin, and I ended up having to take her to the emergency room because she thought she was having a heart attack. And it was at the hospital that I found out that she had been using, and it had actually been going on for over a year at that point. When I looked at her more closely, then I could see track marks on her arms. I could see the circles under her eyes. I could see what a sick child she was. And at that point, it was like everything made sense. Because before that happened, there were instances where things disappeared around the house. There was, money that was missing, or I would send her and her boyfriend to the store with $50 and they would come back with $30 worth of food, things like that. And in hindsight, I never talked to my kids about it ever. Like you do talk to your children about drug use and drinking and driving and things like that, because I honestly never thought they would come across heroin. When I was growing up, my whole life, really, I never knew a single person that used it. I never knew where anybody would even get it from. It seemed like a really distant problem that once in a while, I know Lou Reed used it, and I know, the Rolling Stones used it and things like that, but I didn't know anybody personally who had used it. And now what I'm finding out is it's everywhere. And in fact, we've had a few children in our school system that have overdosed recently in the Rochester School District in Oakland County, Michigan. The police say that it's everywhere in the schools. It's very easy to get. And what children don't understand is when they use it, no matter how good it makes them feel, within 3 times of using it, your brain craves it so bad that it is almost impossible to stop using it. It actually changes the chemistry of your brain with just a few uses. So I'm divorced, and so the first thing I did when I found out about this is I called her father, who lives in another state, and everyone in the family was freaking out. What do you do? How do we deal with this? The hospital gave me the number of a social worker. I called the social worker. There was only one rehab facility in Michigan that she could go to for kids under 18. So we sent her to that, and she was there for a month. And after she was there for a few weeks, I could go visit her. And, we had, her dad came from out of state to visit her too. And we had all these little things that we had to do together to try to get the family through this and understand where she was coming from. And as I started reading about this drug and learned more about it, I just couldn't believe how addictive it was and what it did to people. And so when she got out of treatment, she had missed so much school that she had to go to like an alternative education school, which is like aside from a high school where you still like take high school classes. It's usually like for troubled kids or kids that have gotten into trouble during school and had their school year interrupted. And she did really well with that. And there were other kids that had dependency issues that were enrolled in that program. So we started, we had these social worker visits, and then we had a doctor who's a substance abuse specialist, and he put her on Suboxone. And Suboxone is just this prescribed drug that helps reduce the cravings for using heroin. And if you use heroin when you take it, the effects aren't as great. So it's kind of a waste to do it. And it didn't really work with her. And it was really, really expensive. It was like $60 or $70 a week, I think, at the time to get it. So she tried that for a while, but then she relapsed. This doctor that we were taking her to told her point blank the first visit that we went to, if you continue to use heroin, you will either end up dead or you will end up in jail. That is the only way that this goes. And he was right. In the last couple years, since I found out about all this, out of the 4 kids that my daughter was hanging out with, 2 of them are dead. And she and her ex-boyfriend are both in prison. They were together when they got in trouble for the original thing, which was stealing a lawnmower out of somebody's garage to sell it and get money for drugs, which in the state of Michigan is now considered a home invasion. That's a whole nother issue with me, but having had beer and tools and all kinds of things stolen out of my garage for years and years and years, I never knew that was technically a home invasion, but apparently now in Michigan it is, and the penalty is pretty severe. So my daughter went to rehab again, and when she came out, we had all these things we had to do. We had to go to meetings every night. We had to go to Narcotics Anonymous, and basically, when she went to these meetings, she just sat around with a lot of other people that all use drugs, and that's kind of all they talked about. Because I went with her to some of these meetings, was their drug use and how difficult their life is now. So she did not find that helpful, and I know that it is helpful for a lot of people. And in some states, in Michigan in particular, it's a requirement for anybody who has any dependency issues and ends up in court, that usually they are required then to go to Narcotics Anonymous, and they have to show proof of their meetings, and they have, of course, to go and get drug testing, and they have to meet with a social worker on a regular basis or be involved in a social program, plus their probation officer. So this last time around, she was sentenced to a county jail, and she did a year in county. And there were lots of people in county with her that were in there for things like, their driver's license was expired, or they didn't have insurance, or things like that. And they had really, really hard sentences, which was kind of surprising to me, considering the amount of crimes that people are let off of all the time. But anyway, she got out at the beginning of last summer, and after being in jail for a year, she was done with drugs. She was absolutely adamant that she would never do this again. But within 3 days, she was. So she wasn't able to escape detection because of the drug testing that she had to do. The judge sent her to prison, and she will be in there probably till November or December. And it's definitely been a lesson learned for her. But there was a couple of things that have come out of this that were also very surprising. One thing is that I can spot a heroin addict now from a mile away. They have this unique look to them. And I see it sometimes in stores. I live across the street from a college, and there's a lot of kids around here. And if you see one of these kids that are using, they have this distinct look to them. They're really pale. They have these really dark circles under their eyes. They have kind of this glazed look in their eye unless you pull out your wallet, and then they are totally focused on your wallet or money or things like that. It's really strange. And I had seen that kind of behavior too when she started using again, and I knew right away that she was. And I'd like to invite anybody who is in the chat or listening to the show to call in 877-342-6673. If you have any comments about addiction, rehab, treatment, the court system, or anything of this nature, my biggest concern is with the availability of it now. How many kids out there might not turn it down, thinking it's just this one thing that they might try sometime? And yes, someone in chat just said their pupils get really small. That's right. They become like pinpoints. That's another way to be able to tell. Give us a call if you have a story to share, though. So now with this current incarceration, what we're faced with is that when she gets out of this situation, when she gets out, and she'll be on parole for probably forever, she can't be around here anymore. She cannot be anywhere close to anybody that she could possibly get drugs from. It's that strong of a thing with her. And when she got out of her county stay at first, she thought that she could do it, being here and just avoiding those people, but it turned out she couldn't. It is kind of a desperate thing that we're going to have to move to get away from it, and move pretty far too. And I know drugs are everywhere. And I know that, there's a big concern wherever you go. If you want to get it, you certainly can. It's very available. It's easy to find. But, I guess it's worth the effort to do that if she thinks that it will help. Another thing, though, that I came across, and this was because I confided this whole story to Loren Murray back in the summertime when her and I were working on some research And she could tell that I was upset one day. And she's like, what's going on with you? You're not yourself. And I told her, I really broke down and told her everything that had been happening and what was going on with my daughter and how I didn't know what to do anymore. And she said, well, what you need to do is you need to find her some ibogaine. And I had never heard of ibogaine. I remember Hunter S. Thompson had written a story, I believe it was about Walter Mondale using ibogaine during his campaign, which actually ended his campaign. I might have the details of that wrong. I know Hunter wrote about it, and I know it involved a politician. And he had started this rumor and kind of wrote it as a joke piece. And no one even knew what ibogaine was. But the thing is, today, nobody even knows what it is. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to Wide Awake News. Welcome back to Wide Awake News. I'm your host, Christina Consolo, and we're talking about heroin and heroin addiction, my own personal story of what happened to my family. I have a 21-year-old daughter who's a heroin addict. She's currently incarcerated in prison. And in researching, the addictive properties of it and what can be done, there's only a small percentage of people who can actually kick it. For the rest of their life, they seem to want to crave it. And I pulled up some stats on the break. These are international statistics. An estimated 13.5 million people in the world take opioids or opium-like substances, including 9.2 million who use heroin. In 2007, it's a little outdated, but it's the best we have here, 93% of the world's opium supply came from Afghanistan. And more on that in a moment. The 2007 National Survey on Drug Use and Health reported 153,000 current heroin users in the U.S. in 2007. I know for a fact it's over 1 million now. It's probably a lot higher than that. Opiates, mainly heroin, were involved in 4 out of every 5 drug-related deaths in Europe, according to a 2008 report from the European Monitoring Center on Drugs and Drug Addiction. And opiates, mainly heroin, account for 18% of the admissions for drug and alcohol treatment in the U.S. And there's a quote here from a girl who is a heroin addict. From the day I started using, I never stopped. Within 1 week, I had gone from snorting to shooting. Within 1 month, I was addicted and going through all my money. I sold everything of value that I owned and eventually everything that my mother owned. Within 1 year, I had lost everything. I sold my car, lost my job, was kicked out of my mother's house, was $25,000 in credit card debt, and living on the streets of Camden, New Jersey. I lied, I stole, and I cheated. I was raped, beaten, mugged, robbed, arrested, homeless, sick, and desperate. I knew that nobody could have a lifestyle like that very long, and I knew that death was imminent. If anything, death was better than a life as a junkie.
All right, I'm going to pause it right there because the break's coming up. Stay tuned. On the other side, I'm going to bring us back in, and I'm going to go right back to the audio. Powerful, powerful stuff. Thank you, Christina, for having the courage to speak about this. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. I'm going to get right back to the audio of Christina discussing what real addiction is like, real heroin addiction. And you can remove heroin and insert whatever other drug in there, and it's pretty much the same. What happens to the families, what happens to the person using. Anyway, I don't want to pontificate and get off on a tangent. I rewound it about 1.5 minutes because when she was talking, she had quoted a heroin user. And I thought what the girl said was very powerful, and I wanted you all to hear it again. So I'm going to pick it up with her reading this quote.
And there's a quote here from a girl who is a heroin addict. From the day I started using, I never stopped. Within 1 week, I had gone from snorting to shooting. Within 1 month, I was addicted and going through all my money. I sold everything of value that I owned and eventually everything that my mother owned. Within 1 year, I had lost everything. I sold my car, lost my job, was kicked out of my mother's house, was $25,000 in credit card debt, and living on the streets of Camden, New Jersey. I lied, I stole, and I cheated. I was raped, beaten, mugged, robbed, arrested, homeless, sick, and desperate. I knew that nobody could have a lifestyle like that very long, and I knew that death was imminent. If anything, death was better than a life as a junkie. And we have a caller on the line. Meat Dog, are you there?
Yeah. Hey, let me put it this way. I used to have a problem with alcohol.
Uh-huh.
And I been sober now 14 years.
How'd you get sober?
How'd
you get sober?
I went to AA meetings. I'm an alcoholic.
Okay.
And so I never got into drugs very much. In my early 60s, I did trip on acid a few times in the early 70s. And I did smoke pot. But hard drugs always scared me. And it got to the point I never got into too much trouble with the law. I've never had any DUIs. But I've just been fortunate. I really don't like to divulge this, talk about this kind of thing, because it's obviously very personal. But since you came out on this and, and asked for help, I thought I would reach out to you. I don't go to meetings here in the D.C. metro area very much because I don't like the meetings here. I got introduced to AA in Southwest Virginia, where the meetings are small, people are friendlier. Maybe it's because I just don't like the people here that much, per se. And more urban, a lot of stuck-up people here. I do know I've rubbed shoulders with people that have had other addictions like heroin. And I knew this one guy that would go to AA meetings. He was hooked on heroin for a year, but he was on methadone like 15 years.
Yeah.
Which is very ironic, And in a way, I think maybe the government kind of likes that. And so, I don't know. I guess being on methadone better than being on heroin, I suppose. But 15 freaking years, and I know people that are drug addicts, exclusively drug addicts, and they tell me that they don't go to Narcotics Anonymous meetings because, like you alluded to earlier, all they do is talk about drugs, and they stay in the past and don't work on solutions. So instead, they go to AA meetings because Alcoholics Anonymous meetings tend to deal more with the issues and with going beyond addictions. I would recommend Al-Anon, which is for people that have relatives or a spouse or children with drug or alcohol problems. Al-Anon is an organization that helps people deal with the addictions of their relatives or their spouse. And the whole premise of Al-Anon is you can't change the person. It helps you deal with their addiction because you can't make somebody sober. You can't make somebody stop drinking. You can't make somebody stop taking drugs as much as you want to. And Al-Anon helps you deal with their addiction. And if you have a daughter or any other relative that's in prison, they have, meetings inside the prison, it could have a twofold advantage to them because hopefully it'll maybe get their mind straight. Maybe they could have a spiritual awakening. And to be quite frank, it looks good on their prison resume that they're doing something. But the bottom line is they have to change their playgrounds and their play friends. Once they get out of prison, they can't hang out with people that use. I mean, I don't go to bars. I don't hang out with people that drink. I don't hang out with people that do drugs. I have no desire whatsoever to be around that environment at all. So I'll pray for you and I'll pray for your daughter. And God works. I used to meditate every day. I meditate at this Quaker meeting that helps me spiritually. Ironically enough, meditation, my experiences that I've had through meditation correspond directly to the Hindu religion. With Kundalini, when I close my eyes and meditate, I see certain colors. So, I would recommend going to Al-Anon. That'll help you deal with your daughter's addiction. And pray. I thank God. I believe in God, and I think a spiritual awakening can occur, and it does help. To me, it's essential.
It sounds to me like you got to a point where you were just done with it.
Well, yes. Yeah. I mean, hangovers, would have a hangover that would last all day long. I would wake up in the morning and I would drink a gallon of water and I still feel like I'm dying of thirst. Because I'm talking about drinking 3, 4, 6 packs of beer in one day. That was typical.
Yeah.
I'm
glad you're on the right track, and I'm glad that you hang out and chat a lot, because I've seen you in there before. And it really helps I think, probably other people to hear that too. I mean, the stories are so similar. When I talk to other people who have this going on in their family, I noticed a post one day on Facebook from another Fukushima researcher that sounded like they had some kind of similar problems going on in their family. And I messaged her and I said, I want you to know that I've been dealing with this problem. And, the same thing was going on in her family. She had a teenage son who had been using too for a couple years. And, by the time they found out, like, the habit was so bad because they're so good at hiding it. And it's like that with anything, with alcoholism or, with heroin or any kind of drug abuse. They're really, really good at hiding it from other people till it gets to a point where they just can't hide it anymore because their life is falling apart and their health is falling apart.
I talked to this one guy who was a heroin addict, and this is what he told me. He used to be a heavy smoker as well. He told me that it was harder to get off of tobacco than it was heroin. He said after a week, once the addiction wore off, he was okay. But he said tobacco was much harder for him to get off.
Yeah, I guess it's a very similar addiction mechanism. There's like a switch in your brain that gets flipped with smoking cigarettes or using heroin, and you can't flip that switch back very easily.
They call it with alcohol, it's a physical addiction with a mental obsession. And so it's not something to be taken lightly. And, like that actor, Philip Seymour Hoffman, this guy, I guess probably because he thought he was rich and famous, he was invulnerable, but nobody is safe from addiction. And, no matter how rich you are, no matter how young you are. So all I can do is just check out Al-Anon. That helps people deal with their relatives or spouse that are drug addicted. That you might get some solace in that. And if your daughter doesn't like the Narcotics Anonymous meetings, I recommend that she check out Alcoholics Anonymous. She might like that better.
Well, I really appreciate the information. Thank you so much for calling. Some of the long-term effects on the body from continued use of heroin in particular are very destructive. Frequent injections can cause collapsed veins, can lead to infections of the blood vessels and heart valves. Tuberculosis can result from general poor condition of the body. Arthritis is another long-term result of heroin addiction. The addict lifestyle, where heroin users often share needles, leads to AIDS and other contagious infections. And it's estimated that 35,000 new hepatitis C liver disease infections each year in the United States. Over 70% of those are from intravenous drug users. Some other long-term effects include bad teeth, inflammation of the gums, constipation, cold sweats, itching, weakening of the immune system, coma, respiratory, breathing illnesses, muscular weaknesses, partial paralysis, menstrual disturbance in women, inability to achieve orgasm in women and men, loss of memory and intellectual performance, introversion, depression, loss of appetite, and insomnia. People believe that heroin is super, but when you lose everything, job, parents, friends, confidence, your home, lying and stealing become a habit, you no longer respect anyone or anything. And that is from Pete, an IV drug user. One of the things that I try to tell all of my friends who have little kids is to make sure that they talk to them about how destructive this drug is, because there's a lot of kids that think they'll just try it once and see what it does, and then they like it, they do it a couple more times, and they're hooked. I mean, within 3 times, they are hooked. Now, this has also kind of led me down the road of alternative treatments when so much has kind of failed us with this. And one of the things that Loren had mentioned to me was the use of ibogaine. And ibogaine is a naturally occurring psychoactive substance that's found in plants, which are found in Central and South America. It's legal in Mexico, it's legal in Canada, but it's illegal in the U.S., and it has been, I believe, since the 1960s or 70s. It's a psychedelic with dissociative properties, and the substance has been banned in many countries. Ibogaine containing preparations are used for medicinal and ritual purposes within African spiritual traditions of the Batiwi, who claim to have learned it from pygmy peoples. Although it was first commonly advertised as having anti-addictive properties in 1962, because of the Western use being illegal, it has not been studied for those effects as it has been in other countries. There's some great documentaries that have been done on ibogaine, but what really kind of irks me is when I realized, that actually could be something that's helpful. Of course, you can't get it here without going through illegal channels. There are a couple of rehab places in California that are authorized to use it. And basically, a person will drink the substance and then lay in bed in a dark room for about 36 hours. It makes them hallucinate. It makes them usually kind of sick to their stomach. And it's used in all these religious ceremonies in some indigenous peoples. But the side effect of this drug is that it completely fixes the switch that's broken when people have strong addictions. And if it doesn't work the first time, sometimes the second or third application is needed, and by then the person is fixed. And this recent documentary that I had watched had interviewed specifically heroin users, and how every single thing that they had tried had failed them in kicking their addiction until they used ibogaine. Is that why it's illegal here? Possibly. Because why would you prescribe something to a person that could fix them within 1 to 3 uses when you can put them on Suboxone and have them on that the rest of their life, or methadone, which seems to be what's happening. In fact, I had to see my doctor who does my marijuana card for me through the Michigan State Registry, because in Michigan it is legal for medicinal use, provided that you have a physician's certificate and you go through the proper state agencies and pay a bunch of fees and so forth, and you can use it legally. And this doctor that I go to just happens to be a substance abuse specialist who was also my daughter's doctor, who put her on Suboxone. And when I saw him earlier in the week to renew my card, I had talked to him about my daughter, and I said, I'm interested in seeing what I can do about getting her some ibogaine or getting her into a treatment plan. And he said, "What's that?" He had no idea what it was. It doesn't make any sense. Unless his Rothschild-funded medical education decided that he didn't need to know about that. Because another thing that I found rather interesting, again in talking to Loren, is that most of the heroin that is brought into this country is facilitated by the British Empire. And that could be part of the reason why we still have troops in Afghanistan. Now, this is something that's really out of my realm of expertise, but I had been strongly encouraged to read a book called Dope Incorporated, Britain's Opium War Against the World. It was written in, I believe, 2010, or possibly it had an update to its previous books. Dope Incorporated. And this highlights how the British Empire has been able to successfully import and distribute heroin in our country for years without any interference from the U.S. government. And I find that rather astounding to know that something like that could possibly be happening. But, really, in the scheme of things, with everything else that's happening, with what I know about Fukushima, with what I know about 9/11, with what I know about the banking industry, and what our politicians are doing, it really doesn't surprise me if that's been going on. So check out that book. I don't have a PDF link for it online, although I hope to find one. You can get it for $13 on Amazon for a used paperback. So a little bit more here about ibogaine. It is uncertain exactly how long it's been used in spiritual practice, but its activity was first observed by French and Belgian explorers in the 19th century. Since the 1930s, ibogaine was sold in France in 8 milligram tablets in the form of something called lambarine, an extract of the Tabernath Manai plant. It was advertised as a mental and physical stimulant and was indicated in cases of depression, asthenia, and in convalescence, infectious disease, and other physical and mental defects. The drug enjoyed some popularity among World War II athletes, but was eventually removed from the market when the sale of the products was prohibited in 1966. It was placed under regulatory control in 1967 as part of the U.S. government's strong response to the upswing in popularity of psychedelic substances, though ibogaine itself was scarcely known at the time, and apparently it still is, even to doctors who treat drug addicts. It's just astounding to me. So I'm hoping that possibly a change of scenery, a change of living circumstances, and this current incarceration that my daughter is experiencing, which, has good days and bad days. There's a lot of drama that goes on in the prison system on a daily basis. You're unfortunately stuck in there with a lot of crazy people too sometimes, which can be kind of difficult for a young girl to deal with. And I'm hoping that it's not a situation that she will ever want to repeat, but I want to make sure that I'm doing everything that I can to support her and help her when she gets out. I talk to her almost every day. I've been trying to get a visitation form approved since she went in December, and they keep losing my paperwork. They've lost her paperwork. She was supposed to go to boot camp, and they can't find any of the paperwork for that either. It's just a lot of fails before you get to the system, once you're in the system, and when you get out of it. And it's a long journey that I wouldn't want any other family to ever have to go through. Please share this information with anybody you know who has teenagers or young adults who might find this drug in their lives. Thanks for listening tonight. Have a good night, everyone.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. And again, thank you, Christina, for having the courage to let me air that, and even having the courage 2 years ago to go on air and speak about that off the cuff like that. It takes a lot to talk about things like that. But people need to hear the hard truth like that. And anybody that has someone in their life who may be an addict knows that, even from what Christina told you guys. It's only like a 10th. And you've all experienced the same thing. You're not alone. None of you are alone, and that's one of the reasons why I know she wanted to release this. She wants people to know that, look, there are people out there like you. We're all experiencing the same horrible phenomenon together. We need to do something about it. Part of being able to do something is knowing who's doing it, which she dabbled into, and you heard Loren dabble in that clip I played at the end of the first hour. Isn't that interesting how that goes together? This show was done 2 years ago, and Loren randomly said the same thing about the same book. She mentioned the book, Dope Inc., in the interview at Hamamoto. And this wasn't like I didn't plan that. Oh, look, let's go dig that out because of this interview. That's not what happened. Universe works in interesting ways. Anyway, big thank you to Christina for having the courage. And I also want to thank her daughter, because we consulted her before we even made the YouTube version of it about airing this and letting people hear it. And her daughter, who is very much clean and have that lifestyle for over 2 years now, said that she wanted people to hear her story, because even if it only helps one person, if it helps one family understand their kid or their loved one, whoever, a little bit better, and helps them help that person get out of it, then it's worth it. And I thought that was very admirable. She's a 20-something going on 50 with her knowledge. She's a really smart young lady, and I'm very proud of her. And I've talked to her about this before, and I know, she made a decision. She was able to flip that switch herself. That takes a lot of willpower, but she was able to do it. And I want to read you a quote that makes me think of a conversation that her and I had, and it reminds me of her. And it's true for any addict. And I've said this before, talking about addiction. But I saw this quote, and I thought it was very fitting. Every addiction, no matter what it is the result of trying to escape from something by going in the direction of a need that is currently not being met. In order to move past our addiction, we have to figure out what we are trying to use our addiction to get away from, and what need we are trying to use our addiction to meet. Very powerful. If you have to go back and rewind that, cut that out, listen to it a couple times. The graphic is actually, of that quote, is actually in the video that we put out that corresponds with the show that Christina did. We put it out on YouTube first, and it's up on my YouTube channel, DTRH Radio Archives. It's actually the last thing that's uploaded there, and I will tell you the title right now. I just want to make sure I get it proper. I know it's Thoughts. I believe it's Thoughts from the Mother of a Former Heroin Addict, but I want to make sure it's correct. Yep, Thoughts from the Mother of a Former Heroin Addict. Go listen to the video again if you need to, separately over on YouTube. Pass it around. Share it. If you know somebody in your family or know someone that's going through this, share it so they at least understand they're not alone. When you're going through something like this, a very life-changing event, you feel alone. And it's always good to know, it doesn't matter how many friends you have, you feel alone. And it's always good to know that you have someone out there that understands you. It's good to know that even though you feel alone in a room full of people, that there's someone that gets what you're going through at that present moment in time.